Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Farnsworth, and for my case study, I did it over autism spectrum disorder in education. Okay, and just kind of an introduction and background to what ASD is, as well as the person I interviewed for my case study. Autism spectrum disorder is defined by the National Institute of Mental Health as being a neurological and developmental disorder that affects interactions, communication, learning, and behavior. They also specify that it's considered a developmental disorder because most symptoms of it will present before 2 years old. And the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also lists several common experiences and symptoms that those with ASD experience. And before I read that list, I think it's important to remember that autism is a spectrum and that not every person who has ASD will experience it in the same way or have the same symptoms. That being said, several common experiences are gastrointestinal issues, atypical sleep or eating, epilepsy or seizures, anxiety, delayed speech, delayed movement, and many other potential symptoms. The CDC also did a little study in 2022 on 16 US communities to look at the prevalence of ASD in the US. And they found out that the prevalence of it varied depending on location. For example, in Texas, 1 in every 103 children were on the spectrum, but in California, 1 in 19 were. And they averaged it out to be about 1 in 31 children in the US being on the autism spectrum. As a background for the person I interviewed for my case study, his pseudonym was Cybertruck, which was chosen by him. He is 19 years old. He's the third child, and he's attending UVU in cinematography. And his interest for cinematography and film started during school when he was going to Spectrum Academy, which is a school that specializes in ASD. Some challenges that he's experienced from ASD, a few of them are on the list. When he was really young, he experienced gastrointestinal issues that led to him spending a decent amount of time in the hospital. He also did have a few delayed milestones, like delayed speech. He wasn't speaking very much by the time he was 2 or 3. He did struggle with movement and had really bad balance, which led to him falling a lot and getting bruises. He also struggled with fine motor skills, like holding a pencil. But he did receive some therapy, like occupational therapy and speech therapy, to help him with that. He also has experienced some atypical sleeping and eating. He also has sensory sensitivities, as well as sometimes struggling with change or math and a few other concepts in school. However, his school had a very strong support system. Again, it was specialized on ASD, so they were able to differentiate and help him where he was at. Something really cool I think about his experience at his school was, rather than placing students in a grade based on their age, students were placed in classes based on where they were in academics. They would take a test and be placed in a classroom based on where they were at rather than age. And they had very targeted curriculum and structure to help students. And while not everyone can go to a school that specializes in autism, there's still several strategies that can be employed to help students on the spectrum and other students of varying demographics. And I have 6 listed. And the first one is universal design learning. And one of the great things about this is that it's universal. It's meant to help everybody. And it decreases barriers before they happen. It also increases autonomy because students get to choose students get a choice in how they are assessed on their understanding. For example, on a test, it might be that they can take the test written or they can orally present it. There's a level of choice in there. And it also is a proponent of multiple modalities, which are very helpful for all children to have things presented multiple ways. And the second model I have listed is specifically for ELLs, but it's very helpful for ASD and other groups of children. It's SIOP, or Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. It focuses on strong visuals, modeling, explicit language objectives, and structured interactions. While visuals and modeling are very good for everyone, whether you have ADHD or an ELL or on the spectrum, I want to focus on the last 2 bullet points of how they can be helpful for students with ASD. A lot of people who are autistic struggle with the pragmatic meaning behind words, and it makes communication really hard. And teaching explicit language objectives can help with that barrier of not understanding underlying meaning. And structured interaction also makes interacting with peers and other people feel a lot more safe and comfortable. While a lot of people with ASD do struggle with communication and interaction, that doesn't mean that they don't need belonging or community. And that was something we talked about in my interview with Cybertruck, is how having community, having teachers and friends that he got along with really made education a lot more of a fun experience for him. And structured interaction allows people who have ADHD, who have ASD or ELLs, or whatever their demographic, it makes it a lot easier and more accessible. Teach has a lot of similarities to SciUp. It's more focused on ASD. It stands for Treatment and Education of Autistic and Related Communication Handicapped Children. And it promotes strong visual support, predictable routines, and organized environments. And again, visual supports are helpful for everyone. It doesn't matter your background, they're just good. Predictable routines and organized environments. The goal of it is to help reduce anxiety, increase independence, and help manage expectations. And these are helpful for everyone. Strategies that reduce anxiety can be helpful for kids that have anxiety or ADHD or have low income or instability in their home life. And that kind of leads into the 4th thing I want to talk about, which is structure. And while this is mentioned in a lot of models, it is very important and helpful for children. I remember in my child development class, we talked a lot about how structure is very helpful for kids, and that children who experience trauma in their background had decreased side effects if there was good structure in their life. And this can be intentionally built into classrooms through testing, through learning and formative assessments and routines, and they can be really helpful for children that have instability in their life or coming from a low income background, have ASD or an ELL. It helps students feel secure and supported in the environment, which is conducive to learning, and it's conducive to them feeling a sense of belonging. And the 5th one is ongoing staff and training, is including awareness. While teachers are often really educated about, development and learning and strategies, there are certain things that are easy to overlook or we don't always think of, and staff training and awareness can help bring just that awareness to these issues so that they then can be addressed. And it's not enough just to bring awareness, though. They need to teach effective implementation so that it can properly help students. And staff training and awareness are great for helping teachers know how to interact with students that have ASD, knowing how to help them meet their learning goals and to help them succeed. But it's also just as helpful as at teaching teachers how they can help their ELL students succeed, how they can have their students from a low socioeconomic background succeed, or how they can help students with anxiety or ADHD succeed. And the last one, I feel like just kind of ties things together. It's collective teacher efficacy. And at first you might be like, how is that helping? But the purpose of collective teacher efficacy is building the mindset of teachers coming together collaboratively to figure out what their students need and to help them academically succeed. It builds a culture and system of support of teachers trying to help as a group students succeed. And having good collective teacher efficacy supports consistent implementation of the other models that are represented here. And something else I think is very important to note when you're talking about collective teacher efficacy is that it has been tested in numerous studies, especially by Hattie, and a lot of meta-analysis that he's done. and it is often and pretty consistently a very large effect size. And it especially has a large effect size in high need and high poverty schools, making it good not just for low income schools, but also schools that have a lot of diverse demographics of ELLs, of ADHD, of ASD, and other disabilities that could be present. Okay, and my reflection, I think one of the most important parts that I've learned is that I've learned a great deal of information, but I've learned a great deal more understanding. And I think that's just as important. Additionally, through this case study and interview, I've learned that it's just as important to look at the individual and to tailor and differentiate to them, but it's also important to look beyond them to the surrounding systems and supports that you're using. A lot of those supports that can help with ASD can also help with ELLs and ADHD and anxiety, and we could be using a lot of them to help all of our students because ultimately we want to help everyone succeed. Moving forward, I want to be a proactive teacher who consistently stays up to date on research-based practices that not only help to differentiate, but also help all of my students succeed. I want my students to all feel like they and their needs were anticipated and supported rather than an afterthought. And just a few references for information that I was using in the slideshow. Thank you and have a great day.